Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. This one's interesting, though. I'm being asked to react to something that I've already reacted to. This one is a little different, though. I checked out Yes's Perpetual Change a couple of years back doing the studio version, but today I've been asked to check out the live version. This is partially in response to something that I had talked about on our last reaction, but is also stuff that I talked about during Perpetual Change when we checked it out a couple years ago. This one comes at us from Vic. It says, I can tell you that for those of us who were Yes fans before we ever saw them live, Yes Songs was a revelation when we heard it. Fragile and Close to the Edge had just come out, and we loved them, but to find out that these guys could actually play their complicated music live put us over the top. It was thrilling, and remained a thrilling ride for many years. I did make some changes to this. This was a very lengthy comment, so we do have an ellipsis here to kind of cut a little bit of fluff out. That was mostly for me, I think. It says, you said that you would like to have heard the guitar outro developed a bit. That's exactly what Steve Howe does in this performance. It's one of the sweetest things ever. It has a vibe that is both hopeful and melancholy at the same time, perfectly representing the perpetual change that is life. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. I'm going to look at this perpetual change. This is a 2023 remaster of the... Oh, I'm sorry. I said it was 3 minutes longer. It's about 5 minutes longer. This is a 14-minute long rendition of the song Perpetual Change from the live album Yes Songs. Let's dive in. I was asked to re-listen to the studio version prior to this, and I did. I'm interested to see if I'm going to pick up anything that was different. Also of note is that in the original reaction, I did not discuss lyrics. That was before we did that. I'll be doing that on this one. I can already tell you I'm not a huge fan of the remaster. The organ work over on the side is a little too soft in that. The guitar is overpowering it.
I see the coldness in the night and watch the hills roll out of sight. I learn in every single day, inside out, outside in, everywhere. The sun can warm the coldest storm.
Nice pacing, the push and pull,
The movement on the lawn.
rising us up and then bringing us back down.
I watch in every single way, inside out, yeah, outside.
Kind of like a bluesy country thing going on with the guitar right there.
There you are, making it up, but you're sure that it is a start. When all you see is shiny illusion shining right in front of me. There you say, living in time, we shall control.
Interesting right here. It's in 7/4, but we're alternating 6 and 8 beat bars, or 6 and 8 beat phrases, I should say.
And one peculiar point I see, as one of many ones I'll
Wow, those slides, the chords. It feels so effortlessly placed, even though it's so distinct from the harmonies the guitars were playing just 30 seconds ago. The guitars are playing right here. That bass work, I can get behind that. Such a smooth transition of chords, of key. So bringing back the old guitar riff underneath this new jammy bit. Waltz? This wasn't in the original, was it? I don't remember there being a waltz. love that lift. That's really great. The strings, which I think are coming from the keyboard back there, that's very close to the chord progression from the first section of the song. Very cool bass line under all this soloing. The melodic form of the guitar is interesting. It has like a bluesy underbelly, but it's only like 40% of the note choices. Everything else feels very modern for the time, very uplifting and positive. But you can hear like these bluesy licks sneaking in every once in a while. It's wild. Oh, I'm gonna have words about that. All right. All right. All right. I'm going to preface this, right? There's a lot of cool things in here, and even after listening to some of my analysis points from my last reaction to this, I've got some new things to say here. This was actually pretty eye-opening, I think. And it allowed me to see a very different side of this track. I think part of that was the production, but part of it is also the new arrangement and the new structure to it. But, and here's the big caveat here, I greatly prefer the studio version. And we'll get into that in a moment. I want to focus on the positive stuff, though, first. I'm not a big stickler for saying why I didn't like things. I got to put it out there. I like presenting a balanced opinion, but I don't like to start on that stuff. I don't want it to dominate the conversation. The positive stuff. Here's one really cool thing that I don't think I caught on last time. If I did, I didn't vocalize it, and this is definitely something I would talk about. There is theming to this. There is motif, both harmonically, foundationally, and lead, like proper theme. Of course, we do have that core section that we revisit there at the end, right after the drum solo. It's got some variation to it, but as soon as it comes in, you're like, oh yeah, this was like that first part of the song, right? They're definitely alluding back to that. That kind of idea happens all over the place. No matter where you listen in pretty much any section, you're going to be able to hear something from earlier in the track. I think this is phenomenal, especially talking about the concept of the song, right? I haven't dug into the lyrics, but even on that first time I checked the song out, it's called Perpetual Change, right? I mean, it's baked right there into the title, but I think even Vic had mentioned that the song is about how life is always changing and it has its highs and its lows, and nothing's ever really static with life. But I like this too because while life, history, anything that deals with humanity is typically pretty static, we're usually pushing forward, usually. Uh, there's always rhymes, there's patterns, there's recurring ideas that happen throughout. What is it that phrase says? Um, History rarely repeats itself, but it does rhyme often, or something like that. Uh, that's what I get here, and I think it's pretty cool that as the song is on this fairly linear track, always exploring something new after the last idea, there's still ties, callbacks to something that happened previously, whether it's a bass lick, a chord progression. Um, One cool thing that I noticed, and I pointed it out under the guitar solo there towards the end of the song, was the organ. It had like a string sound on it, and I had mentioned that it reminded me of something earlier. It actually wasn't a chord progression that was played earlier, but I think it was like chords based around the key notes of the lead melody. It was either the guitar or the vocal melody from one of the earlier sections. Um, it was just like I could hear the lick. Like I couldn't hear words to it. I don't know the lyrics, so I mean it could have been the vocal melody, but like I could hear it on top of it. And like whenever the vocals would hit a new key note, and a key note is usually like a very strong note in the chord, and if you get rid of all of the non-key notes, these usually 3 or 4 notes in your melody are really going to showcase what chord or key you are in, they're going to dominate it, and usually also shows any sort of functional harmony, usually as the root notes of the chordal progression. And that, I think, was used to create this new chord progression underneath the guitar solo. And it's little variations like that that are all over the place that just leads me to think this entire song is connected in a way that it doesn't really seem like on the surface. Because on the surface, this is just a lot of different ideas. Um, and this is one area that I kind of want to talk about a little bit on both sides. One, the idea is perpetual change, right? And this song is perpetually changing. Yes, there's these callbacks to something that happened previously, but each section is wildly different than the next, even when they run them back to back in semi-congruent ways where maybe most of the instruments are still playing something similar enough to where we were, but we've changed keys, or we've changed chord progressions, or I know we've shifted from vocal-led melody to guitar-led melody or something like that. In those moments at the beginning when I was like, hey, the guitar's really bluesy here, and then out of nowhere it just shifts into something brighter. Those moments are, I mean, it's what creates the entire feeling of movement throughout this song, but they're also jarring in a way that I don't quite remember. I mean, I just listened to the studio version, and yeah, it's not my cup of tea. I would like a little bit more carryover or foreshadowing or something to show where we're going next, just as a juxtaposition in some places. But maybe it's just the mix on this seems to elevate, put the jarring elements more into perspective. Just something about this rendition really focuses on, like a magnifying glass, on how different these sections are from one another. And like I said, I would like just a little bit more cohesion, do some foreshadowing, keep that drum part going for a little longer, just something to tie them together, give us a smooth transition, a chordal transition as we move from one key to the next or something like that. It wouldn't make the song better, though. As usual, I'm talking about changing the song, which changes its identity and what it's trying to do and who made it. So, if you're a fan of this, 100%, I'm glad. Y'all get to experience something you enjoy. I'm totally behind that. I love finding music that feels like it was written for me. But, I mean, like with, honestly, a lot of metal, especially prog metal that we checked out on this channel, those jarring transitions, they pull me out of the listening experience almost every time. So even if it was just balanced a little more, having some smooth and some jarring, I think would be okay. But to me, it ends up feeling like 6 or 7 songs, or I guess 6 or 7 sections that instead of expanding out into their own tracks, they just smash together in a medley. And actually, that's a good word for it. It feels like a medley. Just we didn't listen to these ideas previously, so they're all new, which kind of defeats the purpose of the medley. And I think that's one of the reasons why it feels a little odd to me, a little esoteric, a little rough around the edges. But ultimately, each section in and of itself is very well done. I really enjoy that. And some of the less jarring changes, such as the key shifts in that first main verse. Maybe it's a verse chorus thing. That's where the key change comes from. Anyways, I think that's phenomenal. I love listening to that guitar give these really moody, bluesy licks, and then the next moment, the rest of the band hasn't really changed doing what they're doing much, but the next moment the guitar bursts into these bright, excited outbursts. And that back and forth works really well for me, even though harmonically it's rather jarring. There's still cohesion there. There's elements that are existing between both modes. And that ends up working really well. And I love moments like that. It almost feels like two sides of the same coin rather than pulling a sheet out of ripping a sheet out of a totally different book and inserting it into this one, which is what a lot of the changes end up feeling like for me. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I enjoy the variety on this track, and in isolation, each of the individual sections are phenomenal. It's just I don't know that they always work together. Speaking about working together, though, this group is just phenomenal. I love listening to all of the ways that their parts are interconnected, listening to the bass play a moving bass line that at times could even be seen as counterpoint to the guitar who's playing a melody alongside the vocals, and they're kind of lining up sometimes not, and the organ over here laying down some cool texture work, sometimes just playing a chord, but instead of just hitting all of them at the same time, just kind of running up and down them, and creating this movement off on the side while, the drummer in the back's just going wild too. Everything just clicks into place. Everything is quite isolated, but part of the larger whole. I really love that. I really do. It's just to me. It's what makes Yes as enjoyable to listen to as a lot of the songs that I've been given are. There's definitely some eras of Yes that I think are a little too cluttered at times. Um, I can't think of any particular song off the top of my head, but mostly that's because I can't think of any titles. But I know in the past there was one track I was like, it's just too much. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's just not balanced as well as I know that they can. And I think this is a really good showcasing of how to write lots of layers, individual layers, where they're all doing their own things, but it comes together cohesively, like a well-oiled machine, more so than a bunch of machines activated at the same time in the same space, just creating a lot of noise. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a joy to listen to it. And the cool thing is when you hear things that sort of ping pong around, you'll kind of hear some emphasis over here, and then they'll kind of back down a little bit as they enter into, maybe they just decide to hold a note out, maybe they become more foundational for a second, and instead of playing a lead line, now they're kind of going for just a moving idea, and then you hear someone else kind of pop in and fill that space, and then they'll have a rest for a couple of beats, and someone else will fill that space, and it's just like there's a really clear understanding of where all the musical ideas exist and how to maximize the amount of sound without having any instruments step over each other. This is definitely some maximalist writing. Every instrument is playing pretty much all the time, aside from some of the solo sections, um, and yet it always feels balanced, and that is a massive thing here. Speaking of solo sections, that first guitar solo was really nice. I enjoyed that. The beginning of the song felt like it was longer than I remember, but once we got into that guitar solo and we started experiencing, I'd suppose, the back half of this track, that's when things started to click and we started to move at a faster pace through ideas. I was like, oh yeah, this is the perpetual change I was expecting. This is closer to the studio. I almost wonder if they lengthened out the intro, the first couple of sections, a little more. Regardless, I love this first solo. When it came in, it felt like a breath of fresh air, and the oh man, it's the phrasing of it all, right? The way that the melody will speed up and slow down, it'll get heavier and then get lighter. There's also playing around, I think, with maybe pedals. I don't know when this was. 1972. Yeah, they must have had pedals then, right? Because he's actively changing his guitar tone on the fly. A little bit more bite and buzz and fuzz, and then the band kind of drops their energy down, and he's playing lighter, I would guess. That's where the volume change comes from, but also the timbre changes a little bit too. Some of that fuzz is removed. So yeah, done on the fly. That's got to be with pedals, right? But it's the dynamic writing there that accompanies the faster playing, the slower playing. It's a little bit of showing off, of course, but it's also a very measured way of writing too, in order to craft a melody that feels very tasteful, that pulls the audience along a story. I think this was the first one, right? The first solo. The second guitar solo, closer to the end of the track, right before the drum solo, was very cool because this was the one that began to work in some bluesier ideas alongside that modern rock sound. And it was so bizarre but worked so well. I wish I knew how this worked. Just every once in a while, occasionally throwing some blues licks, just like 5 or 6 notes that really showcase a bit of darkness underneath the song, and then scooping it back up into a brighter sound. And it's not like playing accidentals where you take a few notes outside of the chord to add some spice. I mean, this does add spice, but it also works with everything else that's going on in the band. It's not creating any levels of dissonance as spice, just a different emotion. And there's got to be something going on with the chord progression that specific chords are going to allow this extra chordal interpretation to just work well with everything. And it was just, I mean, it's like the beginning of the song, the bluesy side and the brighter explosive side, and just pairing the two in a way that just it feels so right. And he just pulls it off so effortlessly there at the end. Those two solos were phenomenal. We got to hit some of my low points, though. I'm going to make this quick. I don't want to stick on this too long. One is that the song, it kind of drags for me. Part of this is the extended jam sections of it. I did like the extended solo. I'm glad I got to hear it, but I felt like it lasted a little too long. There were parts of it that felt like they were filler. Not everything felt like it was a masterful story, concisely told. It felt like 70 or 80% of it was masterful, and then parts of it was a chapter that probably would have been cut out if they had an editor, but they didn't. So that's kind of how I felt about that. The song as a whole, kind of, it has so much gas, so much energy, so much acceleration, and then at times it just decides to slam on the brakes and look out the window. And it's not particularly anything interesting, it's just a desert, but they're like, we need to capture this right now. And so they'll just sit in an area for a long time, and it's altered. I was going to say ruined. I think personally, subjectively, I would say ruined the pacing, but it changes the pacing. It slows the song down. We explore this section that I think is only slightly interesting, and then we'll pick that pace back up. And once again, much like some of the guitar parts, honestly, I think it just doesn't do anything. It's like, this is why I think I like the studio version better. That feels like had multiple eyes on it, multiple editors, made sure that it did exactly what it needed to do and nothing more. And this is the director's cut that had some deleted scenes in it that were okay. They were neat scenes on their own, but it doesn't really do anything for the film, and it ruins the pacing of it. And so, like, I understand people really loving this version, all the extended jamming sections. There's some really great stuff in there, but what it does for the larger work, I don't think it helps that much at all. And while I do think it's cool to listen to people in their craft get into the zone and just, play some beautiful stuff, I think at the end of the day, I'm always going to be, at least in specific mindsets, what does the art need right now? And I'm pretty quick to cut things that I think are filler. The only time that's different is live, and I suppose that's something that should be brought up here. I'm a huge fan of live jazz. I'm not a big fan of studio jazz. I'm not really going to listen to too much of that, but I love going to see live music. And I'm particularly there for the solo sections. I don't really care about the A sections. It's nice, got a nice tune to it or whatever, but I want to see what these guys are going to throw down. I want to see where their chops are at, what kind of, improv they got. I'm there for the dragging out of the song. But when it comes to this prog rock stuff, I'm not. And one of these days I got to figure out why. I don't have an answer for you. Maybe it's just being in a critical mindset. Well, no, I'm in a fairly critical mindset listening to Jazz Cats too, so I don't know. I'll have to come back to y'all on that. It's one of those parts that I don't know. I know I have this bias. I just don't know why yet. But I really enjoy the more structured parts of this song. And the less structured parts are kind of hit and miss for me. Some of them are really great. I love some of the extended solo stuff. Phenomenal playing there, good melody writing. But there were a couple of times I was like, okay, we need to get this going. We've lost the thread here. Let's get this back on track. And one of those moments, unfortunately, was the drum solo. It wasn't for a lack of skill. In fact, I really liked the dynamic play there. I liked when he brought the energy down, but he kept the rolls going. I mean, keeping that sort of intensity at that speed while reducing volume, that takes clear chops. Trust me, I had to learn how to play the snare drum once, and learning rolls, man. There's a reason I'm not a drummer. That's hard stuff. Okay? But as far as phrasing, pacing, narrative storytelling on that drum solo, I didn't really get any of that. It just kind of felt like flailing. There was a rather straightforward consistency in the rhythm. It was a lot of 16th notes. We had some accent diversity in there, creating different patterns, but that also felt kind of flimsy compared to the repetition everywhere else. And it honestly felt like this just might have been an off night for him. He didn't quite figure out where he wanted to go, where he wanted to take it. Just kind of filled some space. It ended up going in a really interesting direction. I was like, okay, he's starting to find his footing, right? Let's see where he takes this. And as it started to build up into where I thought the drum solo was going to take off, that's when we revisited the A section. We brought that core motif back, and that's why I felt a little, I might have looked defeated there, because I felt like he was finally getting his footing on this, and we were going to see him take off, and no, that was the end. That wasn't a build up into something great. That was a build up into the finale, which was great in and of itself, but it left the solo feeling a bit flat. And the fact that it also completely destroyed the pacing of the song didn't help either. It wasn't an interesting solo for me. And I think that's Bill Bruford, right? I mean, like it's got to be an off night. Bill can lay down some wild drum solos. This one just didn't hit it for me, and I feel like that's a bit of a shame. Let me do some lyrics here, see what's going on, try to tie all this together, and then we'll wrap this video up. I'm going to need some help on this. There's a couple of stanzas that are very clear to me, but the verses, there's a shifting perspective that's throwing me off, and I don't know if it's the language or how it's said. I'm having trouble reading it. The beginning of the song says, I see the cold mist in the night and watch the hills roll out of sight. I watch in every single way, inside out, outside in, every day. So there's a mist that's taking vision away from the hills, and he sees this not just one way, but every way. We'll actually see a recursion of this later on. It says, and one particular point I see as one with many ones of me. As truth is gathered, I rearrange inside out, outside in, perpetual change. This is interesting right here. He talks about the idea that there is change constantly everywhere, not just in the phrase perpetual change, but that there are many ones of me. It's usually pretty easy to see someone in singularity. I am Bryan, that critic guy, right? Always have been, always will be. Except, no. No, even on this channel, y'all have seen me change and grow in my opinion, in the way that I appreciate music and my understanding of music. You go back and listen to the way I talked about, I don't know, pop music, metal music back at the beginning of the channel, and that's not me today. That's just two of me's. What about teenage me, 9-year-old me, 3-year-old me, newborn me? And that's just talking about mental capacity. What about personality? I was an edgelord as a teenager. All right, probably not as bad as that term kind of implies, but I was an edgy kid, right? So it's kind of hard to see me if you've only known me through the channel, through, your TV screen, be like, dude, you're not an edgelord. But I mean, that's who I was at one time. There are many, many me's. And I don't know if this track is particularly going in that direction, but even look at the infinite possibilities of yous, the paths that you didn't take, who you would be if this had happened, if you had never met this person, if you had never seen that work of art, the parts of our life that transformed us. What if they never happened? What if we were transformed by other arts? And so he says he gathers and rearranges truth inside out and outside in, understanding that everything can be seen from multiple perspectives, that there's so much truth here, but that the only truth is that everything changes. Everything changes perpetually. Nothing is ever the same. This is the part of the song that I get. At the end of the song, it says, as mist and sun are both the same, we look on as pawns of their game. They move to testify the day, inside out, outside in, all of the way. So it's talking about the passage of time there. He uses the mist, I think, interestingly, as a showcasing of the night, and the sun as the day. Interestingly, not to use the sun and the moon, although that is used elsewhere in the track. But the concept is that we see the sun and the moon and see them as separate. That night and day are different things, but they're actually one in the same. They're just two different parts of it. But despite being the same, they're also different. It's in constant change. The sun that you see today is different than the sun that you saw yesterday. It's the passage of time. It's what makes things change. Well, maybe things change in parallel with the passage of time. Looking at time as the catalyst for change, I think introduces some interesting philosophical ideas that I am not well versed to get into. But definitely change happens with time. We'll say it that way. Less reactionary component to that. The rest of the song, though, it goes over my head a little bit. Let's just look at the first main verse. There's a pattern here. He says, and there you are doing this, but all you see is this. This is the format for 4 entire stanzas. He says, and there you are, making it up that you're sure that it's a star, when all you see is an illusion shining down in front of me. So we're talking about the sun here, right? You're in front of me making it up, making up the fact that it's a star, or making up the fact that you're sure it's a star, but all you see is an illusion shining down in front of me. What does this mean? At all. Like, we don't need to convince each other the sun is a star. It says, and then you'll say, even in time we shall control the day, when what you see deep inside the day is controlling you and me. That one line makes sense. It talks about time, the day controlling us. Time creates change. Change is what causes us. Change is a big reactionary component. It is a catalyst for why we do so many things. Cause and effect. Time moves on. Things happen. We react to them. The day comes up, your alarm goes off, you wake up because of it, and you go to work, or you go to school, or, whatever you have to do. That one line makes sense, but nothing else in here does. Unless we're supposed to be conflating that the sun isn't actually a star, it's an illusion of representation of time, because we need to be looking at it metaphorically or figuratively in some way, that it shines down in front of us and showcases the passage of time, which is in itself change, and that feels like too much for what's being said here. We have another stanza later, and there you are, saying we have the moon and also the stars, when all you see is near disaster gazing down on you and me. we do have the moon and the stars. Who is this person who sees the moon and thinks, oh my God, we just have disaster? Unless, again, we take this one step further, that the disaster is change. We see the moon move, we inherent time from that, and we say, oh, we're one step closer to the next thing. The time and change itself is the disaster, it's the catastrophe. I feel like I'm way off on this read because it's too much. It's too complex. There's too many moving parts here that don't work. But it's the only thing that makes sense to me. And that's why I said that I'm going to need help on this. Those are my thoughts on Yes's Perpetual Change, their live version from the 1973 Yes songs. I get what the lyrics are going for, but there's so many parts that feel extra. And I can't really make heads or tails of it without just becoming way too complex for what I think it really wants. There's got to be an easier solution to this because at many points in the lyrics, it is very straightforward. And so if you have your own interpretation of the lyrics, please let me know. I've got to get some insight on this. But the music was fantastic. I all told you what I thought of that. Let me know what you thought of the music. Your opinions, if you thought I was wrong about anything, and I'm sure some of you do. Opinions are fine. One of the cool things about this channel is seeing people who have different opinions and taste in music and trying to find that middle ground there and trying to appreciate it from a perspective that isn't your own. And I'm always open for that. But if you have your own thoughts and stuff, please put that stuff into the comment section. Let me know what's going up with this. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.